Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest this week is virtuoso bass player Stu Hamm. First of all, let's talk about gaming Spotify. The problem with that is when someone games Spotify, it takes money away from legitimate artists and songwriters. And in this case, it's pretty egregious. A company called Sosa Entertainment, led by Jake Notch, who's a pretty young guy, 20, sued Spotify for a huge amount of money. First of all, they say that there were 550 million streams that Sosa Entertainment was not credited for. So they turned around and they sued Spotify for $150,000 per stream. Spotify, on the other hand, countersued. And what they found was that Sosa Entertainment had 23,000 artists, all with the variation of the same name, Legato. And they had 2 million tracks. Now, think about this. A record label of 23,000 artists and 2 million tracks. That gives you an idea how out of whack this is already. Then on top of it, Sosa hired a bot to make millions of fake accounts to play all these songs. So then it gets a little crazier. So then Sosa Entertainment turns around and they also sue Apple, Google, YouTube, Amazon, SoundCloud, Pandora, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and more. When Spotify looked into this more, they found out that they actually had banned this company in 2016. And in order to get around the ban, Sosa Entertainment then changed the names of the artists and distributors in order to try to dodge Spotify's fraud detection system. And then when they looked at the number of fake users on Spotify, they found out that there would be like 5,500 users that came from a small town that only had a population of 10,000. And that an album might go from 0 to almost 750,000 streams in 2 days, which doesn't happen even with the largest artists. So it's possible that Sosa Entertainment could have gotten away with this if they didn't get greedy. And you might want to chalk this up to the youthful arrogance of CEO Jake Notch. He's only 20 years old, so this has a lot to do with it, I think. But what's going to happen now is the wrath of not only Spotify, but Apple, Google, YouTube, and Amazon is going to be coming down on them for all this. All I can say is that what ends up happening here is whenever someone tries to game the system, they wind up taking money from legitimate artists and songwriters, which isn't right. So hopefully this will take care of itself and send a message to other people that are thinking about trying the same thing. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. You can also sign up for my free Vocal Mixing Techniques mini course at BobbyOwsinskiCourses.com. And you can download free ebooks and PDF downloads on mixing, production, mastering, and social media at BobbyOwsinski.com/free-resources. Now, this is an interesting article, especially for an Apple user and an Apple laptop user. Apple just received a patent for a touch-enabled MacBook Pro. Now, for all of the people out there, and there's more and more of them all the time, that think of the computer as their instrument, now it will be even more so, because the computer itself can be used as a controller. Yeah, the patent was to make the whole area below the touchpad a touch-sensitive surface. And not only that, make the keys from the keyboard touch-sensitive as well. Now, obviously, this is going to be user customizable, so you don't accidentally trigger something that you don't want to trigger by just putting your hands on it. But think about the possibilities. This could be a fantastic digital audio workstation controller, or a keyboard controller, or a VST controller. You might want to specify shortcuts and gestures to control apps. Could do all sorts of things right from your computer, right from your laptop. The mind spins when you think about the possibilities. Now, I should caution, this doesn't exist yet. And we don't even know if it exists in the lab, but we do know that there's a patent and it was granted. So look for this in the future. This is a touch-enabled MacBook Pro. My guest today is Stu Hamm, who's one of the world's premier bass players and clinicians. His unique and innovative two-handed tapping technique proves that even the bass can be a solo instrument in the hands of a virtuoso player. Stu has recorded and toured with the who's who of guitar heroes, including Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Frank Gambale, Verheyen and Michael Schenker. He's appeared on a slew of magazine covers, released 8 solo albums, has a number of signature basses, as well as a series of books and instructional videos. During the interview, we traded Frank Zappa stories, spoke about developing a style from traditional walking bass, how he incorporated tapping into his playing, pain management from playing the instrument, and much more. I spoke with Stu via Zoom from his home in Los Angeles. Let's go back to the beginning here. Tell me how you got started into music.
You know, I come from a whole family of musicians. My dad was Charles Hamm, was the president of the American Musicology Association. And when he was growing up, he was a composer and ethnomusicologist, and then wrote a bunch of books on Charles Ives and popular music in America. He's best known for a couple of books on the history of popular music in America. And my mom was a voice teacher and an opera singer. And then I had an older brother who's 6 years older than me that we were pretty close. And he had all these weird records in his room, like Sun Ra and, Live Evil and Mahavishnu and Cream and all these weird things. So I'd sneak into his room and listen to all this weird stuff. And, my dad played poker with John Cage. They were like buddies. So
wow.
When I hear 20th century modern music, I feel at home, So
yeah.
The cool thing was, like I said, I was exposed to lots of music, and pop music was treated as seriously as classical music or performance art by Non-June Pike or whatever,
Yeah. And then,
I played a bunch of different instruments. I played flute for years and years, and I played piano for years. And then, there's a couple different stories about why I started to play bass. One is that, I was a big Danny Bonaducci fan, because growing up in Champaign, Illinois, I would look, kind of chubby, red-haired dude, look kind of like the bass player from the Partridge Family. And also, they're in the Midwest. The high school stage band was really popular, and we had like the state champions every year. And they had, even in my junior high school, they had like 2 jazz bands, the A and the B. It was very serious and very competitive and really good. We were sight reading charts that, it was pretty good. So I started playing bass and immediately just felt that this was the instrument for me and got some good encouragement early.
Okay, so how did you make the transition to bass, though? Was there someone influential in that decision?
Like I said, I was always around, so much different kind of music. And it was a number of things. It was Danny Bonaducci. It was one day there was a rock band playing at the park around the corner from my house in Illinois, and I went, and the bass player had this green Fender jazz bass with a matching headstop and one of those custom amps with the Naugahyde padding and the chrome portholes. And I was like, it's a white curly barbecue cord. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So in 1973, I got my first bass. It was like a red pawn shop Alvarez Les Paul copy and a book called Mel Bay's Easy Bass Method. And then before you know it, I really learned by playing upright and electric, reading through chord changes, walking,
Yeah.
And then it was about a year and a half of playing bass in a big band before I ever played, with some dudes like in a rock band without music. And the first song we learned was Whooping Post, So
wow.
It was good.
Wow, what a pedigree. That's awesome. So then you went to Berkeley.
Yeah, my dad got the job as head of the music department at Dartmouth College. So when I was a junior in high school, we moved from Illinois to Hanover, New Hampshire, Vermont, right on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont. And there really wasn't a school band to speak of out in the woods. So at that time, I started playing in, ski resort, top 40 and jazz bands. I was in a frat band at Dartmouth College, when I was a senior in high school. And then I went to Berkeley. I auditioned actually for New England Conservatory, but I didn't get in, thank goodness. And then 1978, I went down to Boston and went to Berklee.
Berkeley was influential in a lot of ways to you.
I mean, it was. I mean, at that time. I mean, there are more options now, but it's still sort of there was North Texas State. I think if I'd stayed in Illinois, I probably would have ended up going to like Indiana, which had a really good music program, a little more on the sort of marching band traditional. I'm sure they had a popular music program, but if you're serious about it, and maybe then, certainly then, probably now, just to go and be around other people that are that serious about music and be involved in it and enmeshed in it 24/7, was great. I hadn't gotten straight A's in years. My first year at Berklee.
I was the same way, actually.
Where did you go to school?
Berkeley.
Oh, what years?
77 through 79.
Oh, so we were there. So we, that's when what? Studio 8 was a 4-track, right? Or maybe 8-track?
It was 8-track, yeah.
Wow. And then they had the other little studio across the little porthole, right? Studio B.
I built that.
Man, now I go back and, it's just insane. The resources or lack thereof when we went there were just, ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. It was really crazy. But the one good thing about, I guess it's going to any college, it's the people that you meet and the people that you continue to be friends with throughout the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
And certainly that was the case for you because you've met partners in music.
Man, partners and best friends. I guess it was last year we went and, Steve Bailey, the head of the bass department, is a friend of mine, and I was on tour and we had an off day. So we ended up playing the orientation for the summer program. And it's the same thing. It's I think Steve was saying, it's like, look around you because these guys you meet are the people you're going to be making music with the rest of your lives. And I met Steve Vai there. I was just past, when I got there, every night at Pooh's Pub, it was, Steve Smith or, Tommy Campbell and, Victor Bailey or Tim Landers or, Mike Stern. We used to go see Mike Stern play when he still just played his Strat through a Marshall.
Yep, I remember.
At Pooh's and at Michael's and, I used to stalk Jeff Berlin, at all the jazz clubs. And it was amazing.
Yeah, it was really a good time. Okay, so where did you go after that?
After 2 semesters at Berklee, I went on the road with an Elvis Presley impersonator because it seemed like a good idea to go out at the time, to go out and make some money playing music. And my girlfriend was the keyboard player in the band. So I did that for about a year, and we played, Holiday Inns all over West Virginia and the Eastern Seaboard. And it was pretty crazy. I got a bass solo during Polk Salad Annie and played flute when we did the, Dixie medley.
Yeah.
So long time ago. And I did that for about a year. And then, crazy enough, left that gig and went back to Berklee briefly. And then ended up in, I guess, 81. I went to Germany and, again, did a tour with at the time, an East German trumpet player in his jazz big band. His drummer was my roommate at Berklee. So there's a connection again.
Yeah.
I spent the summer of 81 in Aachen, Germany, touring around all of Germany and the Netherlands. And then I got a call from Steve, and he said that, Zappa was auditioning bass players. And he sent me the chart for Black Page and Moen Herb's Vacation. And I shedded it and got home from Germany and flew out to California and recorded with Frank for a couple of days. And it went well. And then he asked me if I was going to stick around. He didn't record on Sunday, so we recorded like Friday and Saturday. And then he said, do you want to stick around and record Monday? And Monday, I had tickets to see Miles Davis at Kix Disco. Remember Kix?
Yeah.
It was right, yeah. So, and I was playing the Michael Gibbs big band at the time. So Michael got me tickets. So, there's like Cicely Tyson and Michael Gibbs. And, and I hadn't seen my girlfriend. I hadn't gotten laid in Europe for 4 months. So. And I was never, a bad career choice, but I was never a big Zappa fan. I like the funny stuff, but for me, his guitar playing didn't really do anything. I respected the musicality. That's all I'll say. But it was great. That's a memory I'll always have, certainly, of seeing Marcus and Bill Evans and Miles and Stern and
What's funny about the Black Pages? It seemed to be the standard of how he'd evaluate somebody. I can remember he said to us one day, he said, I'm looking for a keyboard player, but he has to be really good. And there was a guy that I knew who was a teacher at Berkeley who had just moved out, who shall remain nameless, who was really good. I thought he might be perfect for the job. So Frank said, here's 2 pieces of music, and one was the Black Page, and I don't even remember what the other one was, and gave him a week to shed it. Well, this guy had somewhat of an attitude, and when he came in, Frank noticed that right away. And Frank does not suffer fools very well. Guy started to play the Black Page, got about 4 bars into it, and was not doing well. And Frank said, wait, stop. Play it without your thumbs. So now the guy's playing without his thumbs, and he's really sweating it. And Frank goes, wait, stop. Play it from the last bar forward. So now he's playing it backwards without his thumbs. Finally, a couple minutes into it, Frank stops him and he says, you're good, but you're not that good. I know 3 drummers that can play this better than you.
Yeah, I've heard from Chad, I've heard some stories that, in one way you're funny, and the other way, I mean, he was pretty mean to dudes that he didn't respect musically. I've heard stories of him embarrassing people on stage, and that's kind of like, I don't know where that's coming from, Now,
I got to tell you, I did see a side of him that most people didn't. We were at the AES show back when it was in New York, and it used to be at the Waldorf Astoria.
Wow.
And all the exhibits were in rooms, in hotel rooms. And I'm coming down one side of the hall. He's coming down the other. We're the only people there. He says, stops me. He says, I'm going up to Synclavier. Why don't you come with me? So we get in the elevator. We go up. When we come out, there's a kid, and he must have been about 16 years old. And he has a little pig nose amplifier and a guitar, and he's tapping. And he grabs Frank, and he says, Frank, come and hear me. Frank says, yeah, I'll come back in a little bit. Frank goes in the Synclavier booth, and of course, it's so busy in there, and everybody wants a piece of Frank. Half hour later, the kid comes, taps him on the shoulder, says, yeah, I'll be there. 45 minutes later, this happens again. The kid goes, Frank. He says, okay. We go out into the corridor, and we go into a little quiet corner, and the kid starts to tap. He's playing, and he's so nervous, he's messing up. He's not doing well. And Frank stops him, and he says, that was really great, man. Can you play something else for me? And then his confidence shot through the roof, and he was amazing. And it was Stanley Jordan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
That was a side that not many people saw of him. He could be very helpful.
In fact, I played the very first Synclavier. When we first moved to Hanover, we stayed for a year in John Appleton's house.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Well, he was in like Sweden or something. And we used to go down to the lab when they were messing around with the original Synclavier up there at Dartmouth. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was all from there. Right. Okay, so you did the Elvis impersonator, you came back to Berkeley, and then what?
Flew out to California, didn't get the gig. I guess I lived in Boston for a while. Those are sort of the lost years. Working at the White Hen Pantry there on the corner of Common Mass Ave, and from midnight to 8. And then, doing some gigs and stuff, but it was just sort of like, broke, had my bass stolen, and, I see pictures of myself. I was like scary skinny, and broke and all that stuff. And then Steve called again. Thank you, Steve, and said that he had quit Zappa's band and was going to do a solo record, and he wanted me to come out to California and record it. And if I wanted, I could, I think I paid him like $50 a month to sleep on the couch in his studio, and he was paying me like $7 a day, to record and rehearse. So, it almost evened out. And so I thought about, living around. And at that point I was like so broke. I was going to move to DC where my mom lived and like get a job in a shoe store or something, and then, as it always does, fate steps in. And so I thought about, moving to California or living with my mom. And I ended up in Sylmar, recording the Flexible record. And that just led to all sorts of things, that just sort of the start of it. And then it was such an exciting time for music and bass, especially for that kind of stuff. The him and Joe, instrumental rock. You've got, when I was growing up, there was, there was Paul McCartney and Chris Squire and John Entwistle, and I loved them. But, here comes Stanley Clarke. Here comes, November 8th, 1978 at the Orpheum Theater. Here comes Jocko and Weather Report.
Yeah.
Changed the game. And then I never, since I really did one of the last people to come from the old school, I literally learned to play bass by playing walking bass lines. Who can say that today?
Yeah, right.
So, and playing piano and loving Glenn Gould and, Rostropovich and, hearing one person playing an instrument always excited me, but I'd never thought about the bass that way, really. You know, had never heard anyone play like an unaccompanied, use bass as a solo instrument. And then, seeing Steve, and Stanley Jordan kind of starting experimenting with tap, even though I'm sure it was done hundreds of years ago, just led me to try to figure out some of the arrangements of my piano repertoire on the bass, like Gershwin's Prelude No. 2. And then, I figured out that instead of taking two notes, one to fret it, one to sound it, if you just tap down the note, your other hand could do something contrapuntal. And that just sort of led. And then obviously, learning out the fingerings is where I stole all my writing from Debussy, working on the children's corner. And then through Steve, I guess I met Joe, and then that took off. So it was exciting times.
Coming from walking bass and pretty much doing that when you first started, and then developing to where you are now. Was playing with Steve on that first album, was that like the turning point for you?
Well, I mean, it was certainly a turning point for my career as far as getting out of Boston and getting to California. I mean, just being around those people, and Steve was well connected, and I was in LA. I was auditioning for all these pop bands that I didn't get. Cher, Oingo Boingo, who's the funny guy, like whoâ, all these gigs. So I was kind of in the scene. So I mean, yes and no as far as the technique. I mean, the music that I ended up making was a lot different. I got to say one thing that the amazing thing about that Flexible record is that was done on like a reel to reel, and every time this was before I remember then when TC or whoever sent him like the first harmonizer, where he literally had to physically play that, and then double it and triple it and do it like 8 or 10 times. There was no just scooching it around on Pro Tools,
Yeah, right.
Then they come out with a an effect where you just play it and it'll harmonize it in whatever mode you want. But I think people have a hard time realizing how just precise that was, and coming from Zappa, being in the studio with him was pretty freaking stressful, because he has an incredible ear, and he's coming from the really strict Zappa thing, and it seemed an exercise in not making a mistake, which isn't often conducive for making good music.
Right.
I mean, I had the flip side of that Black Page story was there used to be, if a guy said he could play the Black Page, then he had no groove at all. Right? He wasn't interested in. He never listened to Aretha live.
Yeah, right.
If his soul stew is not in his back pocket, you know what I'm saying? It's just like dichotomy. But I always sort of had one foot sort of in the jazz fusion world. Obviously, it's easy to get labeled as a musician, as much as I've tried, to get out of it, and then how that overqualifies you for some pop gigs, but whatever, you end up here. So it was exciting times. It was just music all the time,
Tell me about your solo records.
Well, I guess it was when Steve got picked up by Relativity Records. He put out his first record, Flexible and Flexible Leftovers himself. And then they got picked up by, I think it's Cliff Coltrane, who was at Relativity Records. And through them, that's how, Joe helped him get a record deal, and it all led to that, which is the next story. But then I was doing these solo bass gigs at a place called My Place in Santa Monica.
No, yeah.
At My Place, right?
Yeah, right.
It's now a gourmet meat shop or something.
Yeah.
Right there in Wilshire. And, it's hard to believe. I mean, I didn't invent tapping on the bass, but certainly one of its parents,
Yeah.
Certainly, have a big part of the DNA. Because just like what I played was just taking everything that's come before me and putting my own spin on it. Immediately after I started doing that, my first records, some Who Shall Remain Nameless bass players came out, and it was just basically playing my stuff. That's the way it is. I mean, I used to try to play, Jocko solos with an Elvis Presley impersonator. I mean, it was just, once I used to whip it like Jocko did at the end of the solo, or play Stanley Clarke riffs over, way down. It was horrible. So, but they came to see me play my solo bass gigs, and the guys from Relativity Records, and they gave me like $3,000 to do the record, and they made me sign a piece of paper saying that I signed away my publishing for, the rest of my life.
Oh, yeah. All right.
All that stuff. And I said, well, great, sure. And of course, I quickly ran out of money. And there was one song that I wrote called Flow My Tears, where I wanted the melody to be played by muted trumpet, like a Miles kind of thing. And the drummer on the record, Mike Barsamano, was playing with Mark Isham, right? So I sent the track to Mark. He got the track to Mark, and he liked it. And he said, I'd love to play on it. But what I need is $50. I got to record it in my home studio, and you got to pay my engineer $50. And I didn't have. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't have $50 in my recording budget to allocate for a secondary recording engineer. It's like I couldn't come up with $50.
Yeah.
My bass was in and out of the pawn shop on Van Nuys Boulevard. It was freaking broke.
Yeah.
And so then I called, I guess, the guy at Relativity Records, Cliff Culturari, and I said, I got a couple songs that need a solo, and I ain't got no money. And then he said that they just signed a new guitar player, friend of Steve's, teacher of Steve's from Long Island, and he was doing a record. And what they would do was they'd do like a pro bono where they would fly me to San Francisco, and he would play a couple tracks on my song, and I would play tracks on his song. So I was originally supposed to play a fretless bass on Joe's song Always, With Me Always With You from The Serpent with the Alien. And I flew to San Francisco, Hyde Street Studios, and they're just finishing they got the tapes everywhere. And that's the first time I met Joe. It was when he played on Flow My Tears and Radio Free Albemuth and Sexually Active. And we just didn't have time to put the bass track on Always. I don't know if he would have kept it, because, I mean, what makes that record work is kind of the static rhythm section, of sort of pretty simple drum parts. And he's playing bass, which is basically just doubling, the rhythm guitar part with a pick.
Yeah.
So musically, it obviously leaves more room for the guitar, and that's the way that his music is worked out. But and then Joe started doing some gigs, and we were just playing little places. And then he got the gig with Mick Jagger, and surfing took off, and he was in Rolling Stone and Time Magazine, and then bam.
Yeah.
It was great.
And good for you too.
That was fun. It was good days.
Yeah. Tell me about your signature basses, because you've had a lot of them.
Well, 3.
Well, that's a lot. That's more than most people have.
It is. No, I mean, dude, I was really, I'm a mellow guy, but all musicians are insecure egomaniacs. So, sometimes I don't think I get enough credit for maybe just saying being the first to get there, right, to the style of playing bass that now is a part of every bass player's DNA, really, realistically, right. But one thing that I am proud of is I was the first person to ever have a Fender signature bass, right, and no one could ever change that. It's not going to make me rich, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to buy me a house in Burbank Hills up by Castaways and DeBell Golf Park.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something, right?
Yeah.
And back in the day, I saw Steve. He was with, I think, Jackson and Charvel, and then Ibanez, and I saw Joe do Ibanez. So obviously that's back when people used to make money, called 1-800-SHRED, and people had mullets and stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously that was sort of like, that was the way I always thought the way it worked was, you're a good musician and you got a gig in Weather Reporter with Zappa, and then you had your own career, right? So this seemed to be the way you do it. You get a guitar deal. So I talked to a bunch of different bass companies, and I've been playing this bass called a Kubicki bass.
Mm-hmm.
It was really great. It had this extra fret on the D, like an upright extension, like on the classical bass. And really cool looking. And I met those guys. I worked with them for ages, Phil Kubicki and Jeff Richardson, and it was great. Still have number 45, the bass they ever made, sort of a famous blue-black bass that I wrote and played a lot of that music on. And then they ended up getting bought out by Fender, or Fender wanted to distribute them. And I think I was instrumental in that, as far as going to these trade shows and dealer meetings. And again, playing this stuff that really no one had ever seen anyone doing the bass before.
Yeah.
And that certainly helped it. And then when I saw that, I thought, well, I have the opportunity to sort of make the modern things of what the Kubicki had with, obviously Fender. I mean, at a certain point, Fender, Leo invented the P&J bass, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's cool,
Yeah.
but really, so there's nothing as cool as Fender, right?
Yeah.
So And so we came up with a design for the Urge bass, which was the first, full 24 fret, 2 octave, Fender bass with active pickups, and it was great. The original ones were short scale, and then the second version, the Urge 2s, were long scale, and they're great. I've got a handful of them here in the house that I play all the time, and that was fun. I mean, and then Fender's a huge company, and they are a business, and it reached a point where they had a lot of signature basses for a lot of people, and it was never super tight, changing door and politics and all that kind of stuff. But at one point, they just after like 20 years, just stopped making them. And I got to make a living.
Yeah.
But that was with Washburn briefly, and the electric bass was cool, but the acoustic bass we made with them was fantastic because, not to my knowledge, no one's made an acoustic bass with an adjustable and intonatable bridge. Right, most acoustic basses have that piece of bone,
right,
over the bridge. So, and if I can't adjust each string's action or intonate it so that the G on the 3rd fret is in tune with the G on the 15th fret, then I can't really play my stuff.
Yeah.
So we did that, and the solution was putting a block of wood in the body. So, but those are great basses, man. They're really great for recording, a nice piezo in them. It was that, and then this and that with Washburn, and quality control and stuff from China, and changing markets and everything, right? 2008,
Yeah, of course.
And then a bunch of guys that I know have been playing Warwick and been telling me about, Hans Peter and what was going on over there. And then they flew me over for for a while, they had these amazing bass camps, like every bass player in the world out in Eastern Germany. It was just beautiful, incredible, amazing. More bass players than you could even imagine in one room. And I met this guy named Marcus Spangler, who's the main bass designer, and he's like a wood whisperer, and they have this incredible, efficient German plant, and they age the wood, and it's all carbon neutral, and they can say where each piece of wood is from, and it's great, beautiful, incredible instruments.
Very cool. Where do you come down on amp simulators?
That's if they can't see it, this is audio only, that's 2 thumbs down. If I wanted it to sound like a shitty Ampeg, I would play through a shitty Ampeg. But, man, I understand what they are. I mean, that's 98% of the musical instrument retail customers are not professionals. So if you have this little knob and you can have fun with it, great. So I mean. Well, you're this. Who's the bass player for Wolfpack? This new young kid, Joe.
Yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah.
I mean, he's badass, and he's got this new bass, this signature Music Man with 1 pickup on it.
Yeah.
And I saw some video where he's going around, man, this 1 pickup is great because it can sound like Larry Graham and it can sound like a keyboard. I'm like, dude, I mean, I understand it, but that's your fingers.
Yeah.
You would sound that way on any bass you play.
When you go out, what do you bring with you when you go out to play?
Minimalist. I mean, for years when I did my solo show, I would try to do it without any effects because, I use this company called Wire World, as you know, that makes really great cables. And I have a signature amp now with Mark Bass. And, if I can get fresh GHS boomers on my bass and a nice cable directly into the amp, flat, then that gives the control to my hands.
Yeah.
And that's been successful sometimes. I've since morphed into where I'm letting myself use some pedals just for fun, not really looping too much because I would have to. There's so many people that are so wonderful at that. But I've got like 4 or 5 TC pedals that I put just for subtle flavoring because I found the TC stuff, again, doesn't eat away the tone. I've worked also with Zoom, and for digital regression, they're the cleanest that I've found.
Yeah.
I like their stuff, and I like some of who makes the octave switcher. They're pretty nice sounding, neutral. But anything you put the bass through, it dilutes the chain, and it's not like a guitar sound that's totally processed. I like just the sound of the fingers.
Yeah, what I found too is a lot of times the low end, the girth goes away.
It's the lower mids. I mean, I had someone just sent me a really cool looking wireless unit, and it looked great and it'll be fun. I wish it sounded good, but it just adds a little compression and takes away like the low mids, which is sort of where my sound is at.
Yeah.
And the compression's another thing. It's like I hate compression. Obviously, if I'm here in the studio recording, I'll put a little peak on it, but again, that just takes away the sound and control from your fingers.
Well, two schools of thought on it is one, you want to keep the signal as solid as possible and never move it. And the other part is I want it to be dynamic. I don't want that. I want it to be dynamic.
No, I mean, it's going to get compressed the shit out of it anyway when they turn it into an MP3, or if you're lucky, play it on the radio.
Yeah, right. You have a great website. I'm really impressed because it shows all the things that you do on the side, sort of. Your online lessons and remote sessions, courses, books, things like that. So how did that all evolve? The books came first, right?
Boy, I mean, back in the day, there's a real famous, the company was called Hotlicks, and they had VHS tapes, and I had one called Slap, Pop, and Tap. That was what way too many people learned how to play crap on the bass that got them fired from their gig, you know what I'm saying? And and again, coming from a family of educators, both my brothers, are educators, and one of them teaches music at the music college, and the other just teaches Chinese literature at UW. And so, teaching is always part of what I do. And that morphed into, I had a couple of books with Hal Leonard, and that I've been with TrueFire for a number of years now. And I've got like almost a dozen courses. Supposed to be leaving in 6 days to do another two, but like all of my other work, it's just gone.
Yeah. Everything's kind of stopped.
It'll come back. But so there's that. And the online lessons, I've always done them. Skype, obviously, this platform is much better.
Yeah, it is.
It's just amazing, and I do that. And another part of my income is just, I'm no whiz engineer, but I can, get around Logic and download a track. And I've got a nice ISO cabinet here that I had, actually a Randall one that I had from my time at US Music, which is Washburn. So I just live in a nice little top floor of an apartment up in the foothills of LA. And so I've got this little cabinet enclosure with a 10-inch speaker in it and then a mic on top of it. And it's closed in so that, when I split it, because the thing is, you talk about the amp simulators, if I send the guy a direct signal and an amp process sound, it's not that millisecond of delay. It's just not the same thing, So even if it's a little crap, like, it's funny because the amp on its own is sort of crappy sounding, but you mix it in, it just gives it this wideness.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone hires me, even though 99% DI, when I play and record my records, but you got to give them the option. If they want to screw up the sound, that's their thing.
Last question, Stu. What is the best piece of business advice that you learned along the way, or maybe somebody imparted to you?
Ooh. Well, number one is if you get a chance at something approaching the big time or something real, is to get a lawyer. Is don't be cheap at that initial stage. Spend the money to have someone that knows what they're doing look over that contract before you sign it.
It's too easy when you're first starting to jump at whatever is put in front of you.
They know that.
Yeah.
They're counting on that.
Well, especially too, if you're broke and it looks like it's a break, sure, that's what you're going to do.
Don't those guys that go on like American Idol have to like sign with their record and give Simon Cowell, half their income for the first 20 years of their life or something ridiculous?
It's pretty bad. Yeah. As I understand it, it's pretty onerous, but either you sign it or you don't go on.
No, that's it, man. Obviously I would have said, people hire who they like too, right? They're really not going to hire a guy they don't like, or don't like hanging out with. And then, if I could go back, hindsight is 2020, but certainly no one ever, except me, and actually some people do now, but talks about the physical aspects of bass playing. I never had a class in, acupuncture or spinal control or posture or breathing at Berkeley, right? They may have it now, but I wish they had, then I wouldn't have had quite the neck and shoulder problems I have now, So it would have been great to go back earlier maybe and start, breathing and yoga and meditation and stuff like that. And, certainly, the drug and alcohol thing, you gotta got to keep a lid on that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, you had some physical problems from playing, and I can understand that, especially when you have even with a light instrument, it's tough. You do it enough. How did you overcome that?
I guess it was about 1991 when I got off tour. I had an album called The Urge that was sort of like my quasi hit. I sang on it, and it's really embarrassing and all that kind of stuff. And just my wrist was killing me. So Billy Sheehan turned me on to this chiropractor that was in LA at the time, treating a lot of musicians. He was working with Keith Emerson. And I actually, for a while, I had a bass endorsement. I had a chiropractic endorsement. He would use my face in ads, and I would get like 2 free adjustments a month.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. So that sort of opened my eyes to just the more holistic approach of medicine, and that led to yoga and meditation and stuff like that. But a good friend of mine, Dr. Randall Kurtz, is a bass player and chiropractor. He has a book called Pain Management and Injury Prevention for Bass Players. And everyone gets it. Bass player shoulder. You can't expect to do this for. I've been playing bass for 47 years, and not your shoulder to hurt. But if you take the time to warm up, no athlete will just put on their, outfit and go play a game. They warm up and they cool down, and it's not as much as drums, but it's a physical thing playing a bass.
Yeah.
And I just think if you're more aware of that early on, you can develop good habits of breathing, of stretching, of warming up, of keeping yourself loose. And I just don't think that's addressed enough.
You can find out more about Stu at stuhamm.com. That's Stu Hamm, STUHAMM, all one word, .com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOInnerCircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Mixcloud, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOInnerCircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.